When are we ready to start streaming? Yeah, I didn't see that on the screen. All right.
The Center Executive Program, or the ACE program, continues to shape the future leaders of disaster management in ASEAN. As the signature program of the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, officially run by the Center, 16 officers from national disaster management offices throughout ASEAN have officially enrolled in the second batch, commenced from February to July 2015. All officers have participated in the new and improved curriculum from on-the-job training in AHA Center, specialized skills and training enhancement, leaders talk, field exercise, international humanitarian system, study visit, leadership in crisis, English and communications for disaster management professionals, and also the team building exercises. ACE program is proudly supported by various dialogue partners and also partners to the AHA Center. And now, after completing 1,000 hours training, 16 officers from across ASEAN has finally emerged to be the leaders of disaster management in ASEAN.
With the success of the two batches of the AHA Center Executive Program in 2014 and 2015, the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management, the AHA Center, organized the third batch of the ACE program in 2016, with the support from the Government of Japan as part of their efforts in building a disaster-resilient region by helping produce and shape the future leaders of disaster management in ASEAN. The Comprehensive Training Program is a signature program of the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management. Commenced in March 2016, 16 officers from national disaster management offices across ASEAN have completed a 6-month-long training worth 1,000 hours based on an improved curriculum from the previous batches. Trainings include hands-on experience, real-life experience on ground, sharpening technical competencies, learning from the top leaders talk, team building, managing project, attaining global perspective, public speaking, expanding horizons study visit, in shaping the future of ASEAN. Officers of the third batch of the ACE program learned valuable lessons and positive experiences through the program.
The ACE program forms the primary selected mechanism on building the capacity of the future leader on disaster management in Asia. The program was initiated to allow officers from national disaster management offices to enhance their skills in managing disaster and providing humanitarian assistance. The ACE programs offer the opportunity to attend an intensive 25-week training on both technical and soft skills essentials to become professional in the field. From 2014 to 2016, the ACE program has engaged a total number of 45 officers from 8 ASEAN member states. This year, with the support of Japan ASEAN Integration Fund, AHA Center conducted the 4th batch of ACE program. This batch will add another 17 officers from 9 ASEAN member states to graduates by December 2017. AHA Center has coordinated an approximately 1,000 hours of capacity development exercises, which divided across 4 core program areas: in-class and online training, comparative study visit, on-the-job training and simulation exercise, disaster management project proposal as the project completion paper. Participants of ACE program has traveled to places inside and outside of the region to be taught by the best expert in the field, to hear the first-hand experience from those affected and those responding to disaster, to be inspired by the impelling stories of the world-class leader, to practice and apply the lesson in a field simulation. For the first time ever, the participants are required to develop a concept note as the course completion project. Participants are challenged to reflect upon the learning that they have received throughout the program and apply it to address issues of disaster management in their respective countries as well as the region. Some of innovative ideas has been heard, such as project on leveraging technology to disaster preparedness project that includes gender empowerment. The ACE program would not be realized without the partnership and support of donors and partners of the AHA Center.
So you can find the address and also the password at the back of the device.
Increasing levels of heat, humidity, and so forth. Right? Planetary boundaries, it's about the system. So when we say system, this is natural system.
We design the metrics by which it will be evaluated.
The National Disaster Management Center is working on it with the Brunei Climate Change Secretariat.
Response to the SDG support to development national.
Is on sustainable cities and communities.
The ASEAN Agreement of Transboundary.
The AHA Center Executive Program.
We have 16.
What kind of support do you provide?
In summer season, we are severely affected by the southeast wind.
管理マニュアルを作ったり、防災教育を展開しています。
So it's a gradual progress of our disaster risk management courses, meaning to improve fire safety in an earthquake situation.
Where best practices in engaging with public-private partnership.
System of planning, depending on hazard.
Express our sincere appreciation, especially to the government of Japan.
The award has made our Central Asia's work visible and has greatly enhanced the value of Central Asia.
I want to put more focus on social and policy perspective.
Really nice experience.
The participants will be able to implement the information and knowledge to their countries, learn about institutional collaboration. They know how relevant it is for science to contribute to policy making and also the role of education.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, citizens of ASEAN, and good day to everyone from across the globe. Welcome to the AHA Center Executive Program, or ACE Program, 7th Batch Leaders Talk. This is the first of a two-part Leaders Talk, and this talk culminates the online session that has been going on for the past 4 months since July. My name is Gaynor Tanyang. I am the ACE Program Coordinator during the day. and also the DELSA project coordinator. It is my sincere pleasure to be the moderator for this afternoon's Leaders Talk. To open our exciting day, please welcome the Executive Director of the AHA Center, Colonel Lee Yaming. Hi, Yaming. Is Payaming in the room? I think they're having really good conversations with our guest speaker. Can I once again call the Executive Director of the AHA Center, Pa Lee Yaming? And while we're waiting, I'd like to announce that we are also streaming live in YouTube. So please go to the AHA Center YouTube channel. And now, once again, it is my pleasure to give the floor to the Executive Director of the AHA Center, Colonel Lee Yaming, for the opening remarks.
Okay, testing, can you hear me? All right, thank you. Thank you, Gaynor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to our friends, I think, Liz, from the other part of the world. Today marks the beginning of the final week of the fully online module of the AHA Center's executive program, the ACE program. Despite the current COVID situation, I think, as you can see, the AHA Center team is still committed to continue with our efforts in delivering world-class education for the disaster management professionals in the ASEAN region. So the team has worked tirelessly with our partners to transform a large part of the ACE program to this online module that you guys have been attending. So I understand that you are into the 19th week after 19 weeks of intensive and very interactive online discussions and lesson. I think we are coming towards the end of the online module already. So after this, there will be a break before we continue with the next part of your journey of the ACE program with the AHA Center. So be patient. The details will be announced shortly. And then as we know, I think we have been working very hard to secure very interesting disaster management and humanitarian practitioner to actually talk to our trainees from the ACE program. So today's Leaders Talk is one such session. I think the AHA Center has done very intensive sourcing to look for very experienced and suitable leaders in the humanitarian and disaster management field to share their experience and knowledge in their area of work. So this afternoon, I think the AHA Center is very honored and very happy to have the Executive Director of MAP Action, one of our ASEAN-Iraq support partner, as our inspirational speaker today. So ACE participants, together with you, I'm very excited to hear from Ms. Hughes and also to gain new perspective through her 25 years of humanitarian and development experiences across the globe. I'm sure we can learn a lot from Ms. Hughes today. So beside Ms. Liz, I think the AHA Center is also very grateful to the support of our partner, especially the government of Japan through the ASEAN-Japan Integration Fund for investing in the education of ASEAN's future leaders in disaster management. So I look forward to an engaging afternoon with you guys and also with Ms. Hughes. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Payaming. That really sets us off to a very exciting start. So the ACE program aims to mold the future leaders of ASEAN in the area of disaster management. The program is supported by the government of Japan through the Japan ASEAN Integration Fund. The training program is also delivered through and with strategic partners in humanitarian sector in the ASEAN region. Let's pause for a few fun facts about the ACE program, 7th batch in particular. One more time. All right. The Leaders Talk is a venue where ACE program participants learn directly from the real experiences of prominent leaders, not only from ASEAN, but across the globe. Today, it is my honor to introduce to you our inspirational leader today, Ms. Liz Hughes, OBE. She began her professional work as a social worker, specialized in community work and child protection. Ms. Hughes joined MAP Action in January 2013, already bringing with her over 17 years in humanitarian and development work with non-government organizations, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, donors, and as an independent consultant. You may want to take out your map because her assignments have taken her to the Balkans, West and Central Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Caucasus. I don't even know where that is. If you were paying careful attention, she has 3 letters to her name, OBE, or the Order of the British Empire, awarded to British citizens who have made significant contributions to the arts and sciences, work with charitable and welfare organizations, and public service. Ms. Liz was awarded an OBE, or the Order of British Empire, in the New Year's honors list in 2021, very fresh. For her services to the humanitarian community, she sees this as a recognition of the work of her team in delivering humanitarian information management support services around the world. ACE program participants, colleagues, and partners, it is now time to shine the spotlight on Ms. Liz Hughes. Ms. Liz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gaynor. It's a pleasure to be here and share my story with you. In fact, being asked to do so has been really good because it's allowed me to stop and reflect a little about some of the questions Gaynor presented me with. So I say good afternoon to you, and I look forward to just spending a few minutes to take you through my journey around 6 key concepts that I found relevant. First of all, these are foundations, vision, approach, staying effective, digging deep, and kudos. So to the first one, foundations. I think leadership has its roots really in who we are as people, and that has its roots in what has shaped us as people, our culture, our family, our childhoods, the way we have been treated, the opportunities we've had, how we overcome challenges, or reached a goal despite the difficulties. All of these are a little bit around to what extent we are resilient. And that's a really key factor, I think, in leadership. All of those factors really are about resilience. So I wanted to take you back to the start of my story and my journey, which is when I was 9. It was the first time I realized things were not always fair. And 2 events happened in quick succession that I think probably shaped me for life. Now, please don't mistake me. I'm sure there were times before I was 9 when I thought something wasn't fair, but that was on a small level. These 2 events have stayed with me over my life, and I've often come back to them in one way or another. The first was being asked one New Year's Eve what I wanted to do when I grew up. Age 9, I was clear I wanted to be in the Navy. I love geography, I love the sea, and I love boats. So to me, it seemed a bit like a no-brainer. But quick as a flash, the 15-year-old son of our family friends who'd asked me that question told me I could not do that because I was a girl. No one had ever told me I couldn't do something because I was a girl before. Even at that young age, I knew that discrimination was fundamentally unfair and it was wrong. A few months later, I was at the house of a friend of my sister. She was older than me and an only child, and on her shelf, I counted at least 10 complete sets of the fashion doll Barbie. Now, you may not know what Barbie is, or you may indeed know Barbie very well, but it's a little plastic 11-inch doll that comes with different clothes around particular themes, often rather gendered ones, such as being a nurse, being a ballerina, being a fashion model. I absolutely loved these little dolls, and I wanted one, but didn't have one. It seemed to me that my sister's friend could not possibly play with all 10 of those sets at one time. And it also seemed to me it'd be perfectly fair for her to lend me one. So I dropped many hints to ask her to lend me one for a short while. And of course she did not. And I went home bitterly disappointed. But I was also really, really aware of how inequitable that was, that she had things I could not have, and that she was unwilling and unable to share it. Age 9, that distribution of Barbie doll resources just seemed all wrong to me. So you may be wondering why I'm spending so long explaining two rather strange and of themselves insignificant examples to you. But I do so because they were the foundations to my outlook on life as I grew to adulthood. An outlook that is about, for me, fairness, social justice, and the distribution of the world's resources. And that outlook has become my overarching driver to the choices I subsequently made. And those choices are what took me into leadership roles where I could have the opportunity to influence, albeit sometimes in extremely small ways, but influence the fundamental inequalities in our world today. But this is a talk about humanitarian leadership, so you might wonder how that's relevant. And I thought it might just be useful to set out my analysis very briefly of humanitarian disaster based on considering who the vulnerable are. Some of us do have the means to pull ourselves out of a disaster or a conflict, but some do not. I believe the role of a humanitarian is to look at those who do not. That's, for me, the genuine interpretation of humanitarian. And if we look underneath the issues, very often, the reason why people do not have the ability to pull themselves out is because of their lack of access to something that might help. My analysis to understanding these issues is framed by human rights. It recognizes where people's access to basic socio-economic, cultural, political, and civil rights is impeded, that impacts their life chances and therefore their resilience to disaster and conflict. We come back to that word resilience. Further, I would understand that not in terms of the individual alone, but in terms of the systems they sit in that shape all of that, their families, their communities, and so on. So that's really why this is an important element for me to think about. My journey from childhood has taken me through teaching English as a foreign language, running my own not very successful art business, training as a social worker, working in the UK as a social worker and a community worker, and then my first managerial role as a program manager for an NGO in Kosovo before the war started and then through the war. All of that work, with the exception of my failing art business, was building my understanding of justice and ways to promote this. So that's foundations. I want to move on and tell you a little bit about vision and how I've experienced that. We all know that having a vision is a central plank of being a leader. It's a unifying factor that helps people understand the end goal. In my experience, there is no macro vision. In my experience, that is the macro vision, the why we do it as leaders. And then there is the vision related to a particular event, context, program, or organizational strategy. The macro vision for me is connected to what I've just been speaking about, the foundations that set the dial for their people's future resilience. And I'm passionate about humanitarian assistance being equitable, inclusive, just, and really delivering on people's human rights. That's my macro vision. But how do we achieve program or strategic vision or an organizational vision? Many books, of course, have been written on the topic, and there are many proven methods and approaches. I don't have a master's of business studies or business administration where I might have been able to study those things, although I often wish I had done that instead of archaeology and anthropology at university, which is very useful but not very applied. Instead, I have used informal methods, very often working with others in the NGO sector, to consider the environment we are working in, the people we work with and for, the ways we might be able to build change. The conclusion I've come to is that that is all very good. All those processes are very good, but they don't actually distill a real vision that people can unite around. I think vision, in my experience, still comes from a passion, a belief, a driving force somewhere in your core. At least this is the case for me. It is indeed all those good proper steps of analysis, but ultimately for me, it is an intuitive sense that this thing matters and this is the thing we should do. Somebody once mentoring me said, trust your compass north. Very appropriate from somebody who works for a mapping organization. I think this is describing your compass north. And I would say, learn your compass north and trust it, because I'm sure you will find that it will guide you in many good ways in your leadership journey. I don't pretend vision is easy. There have certainly been desert periods in my leadership roles where it's not been obvious to me, or there have been two paths that looked equally good, and I've wondered which might be the better one. My strategy when I've experienced that is to do two things. Keep talking to people relentlessly and listen to what's coming through. Your staff, your volunteers, your trustees, your partners, your peers. Secondly, get back to my driving force and really listen to my intuition about where next. I usually do that on a run or up a mountain. You might have other methods to do it, but it does take courage to trust on your intuition. Even where you have a vision, how do you get people on board? In my experience, that's also difficult. People need to engage with it and they need to make it theirs. And that happens when they change it and iterate it. And that comes back to the tone of your leadership. Are you willing to accept that? For me, it has always been important to let people change it and amend it rather than holding on to a pure form of my original vision and find out that later on down the road, the team are several miles behind me. So that's vision, a lot trickier than the books say. The third concept I want to focus on relates to that really. It's about leadership style. This has been a really interesting evolution for me. I would say my first management role was the program manager position I held in Kosovo. I then went on to be country director in several roles, which I have to say has been one of the best jobs in the world for being close to the change you're trying to effect and being senior enough to decide how things go. Leadership in those roles is really, really important, as it is in heading up humanitarian programs. Prior to this, I was a professionally trained social worker that was used to working on consensus style, inclusive approaches based on listening to everyone's opinion and moving to decisions after that. The one exception to that was where the statutory responsibilities of the role required me to be more directive, and certainly there were times when that was necessary. But I found when I moved into humanitarian development situations that not everybody had the same idea about leadership. It is actually experienced in different ways, in different places at different times, isn't it? In some places I worked, people really did want me to tell them what to do, to be a directive leader who was always the one who was most knowledgeable. And that's been the case in the UK too sometimes. These sort of prestige-based approaches to leadership perhaps work for some people in some cases. I think there is absolutely legitimacy to them. Steve Jobs, for example, a CEO of Apple, is said to have a dominant style of leadership, uniting people behind his vision. But some think people were doing it sometimes in a way that was defined by fear. I think it is possible. I think it is possibly fair to say that there is general acceptance in the UK, certainly, that these top-down approaches are seen as good leadership and necessary for most organisations to be successful. But I also think people expect different things in employment now, and there is more dialogue about effective leadership styles, the application of emotional intelligence to leadership, and so on. As a generalist, actually my style of leadership hasn't really been a choice. I've been used to managing people, dealing with things that I know some things about. For example, we had development programs in Kosovo that looked at disability and women's rights, disability rights and women's rights. And those programs ran alongside things I didn't know about, such as water, sanitation, and hygiene promotion. In many situations, I've worked with subject matter specialists who've known a great deal more about their topic than I do. Livelihoods, logistics, relief, food security, nutrition, education, political analysis, the list goes on. I'm a generalist. I think most leaders are, unless they come from a very technical background. But I have worked with the subject matter specialists who my job is to steer through and bring together in my leadership role. So what I've learned, and only really in recent years been able to put a framework around it, is that I see my role as a leader to be enabling others to be their best selves, to grow and thrive so that they can excel as individuals, but also as a team. I do need to listen to them and adjust course, sometimes reluctantly when something I want to do won't work. I need to trust them, let them do it their way, measuring success not in adherence to my way, but in the attainment of the common goals, results, and vision that we share. This servant leadership style is about me serving my team so they thrive, enabling growth, persuading the team to act, and making sure we learn from the past as we plan for the future. If you were to ask me why this style, partly I think it reflects my character. I'm quite inclusive and relational. Partly it's because I don't think you can make people do things they don't want to do, even if you're paying them. And importantly, because I believe excellent people enabled will deliver much more excellent results. It's in the interests of me achieving my leadership goal to do that. But that's not to say I hand off important decisions to them. Leadership's also about courage. It's also about being the last point of decision making. And my job is to have the courage to make some of the critical, macro, and often very difficult decisions within which the team can thrive. But I do that in partnership with them. Ultimately, the buck stops with me. So that's my approach to leadership. I want to move on now to say something about being effective. I really wanted to include this concept because it is often the one I come back to. There are two parts to this. The first is about being open to learning and to change. The second is about looking after oneself as a leader in order to stay effective. It's easy as a leader to keep doing the things that you know work. Whilst I think experience is really valuable, it's also really important to be open to new ways. If I think of my journey when I set out on professional training and practice as a social worker to today, to give you one example, all our records when I was a social worker were handwritten and stored in locked filing cabinets in our office. Today, everything I do is digital and on the cloud. It is a transformative environment that we work in, and it's speeding up and continues to transform very quickly. So staying effective means keeping up with that. I meet a lot of people my age who say they can't be bothered or it's too hard to learn new technology. And I just don't think that's acceptable. I agree it probably doesn't come naturally to some people as it doesn't to me. But I still think it's worth trying to work at it. So I try and invest in self-learning, signing up to courses online to help me understand things, being prepared to search online communities rather than bothering people in our tech team to explain it or fix it. And that self-maintenance is an important idea. I think it demarcates leaders from today from leaders of times past. Secondly, being prepared for change is the hallmark of a good leader. I'll speak a little bit more about that in Digging Deep, but just to set that there. So how about looking after yourself as a leader? It took me a long while to understand this one. It's far too easy to think leaders are invincible, indestructible. That's often the image, isn't it, of great leaders? Not that I would consider myself great at all, but it's just easy to assume that mantle that you're invincible, indestructible. But of course we're not. And if we do not look after ourselves, we become a casualty, particularly in a humanitarian environment, and that's not good to anyone. To give you a couple of examples, I've certainly worked in emergency situations where I relentlessly worked 15 to 18 hours days for days and weeks at a time because I thought it was necessary to do that, as my counterparts and our partners were doing as well. But in these situations, fatigue creeps up. It does impair decision-making, and it means you become, at times, much less effective. I have generally used R&R as a good way of taking a break, and I think it really does help. And over the years, I've really seen the value of doing that. So now I do actually make sure I take all my leave. I make sure I use some of it for at least a good 10-day break, and I don't actually want anyone to contact me whilst I'm on holiday. I respect my own time off and I respect my team's time off. Of course, if it's really critical, then they know they can, but I do think it's important to set some boundaries. I think accepting some of that is a little bit about managing the leadership ego. Are we really so indispensable to our teams and the work that no one else can cover it? Do we not trust our teams? I also focus on having a really good network around me. I have a coach mentor who I talk to about once a month or every 6 weeks, whose primary role is to look out for me. She listens to my work joys and woes. She challenges me. She supports me, and she helps me find solutions. And I find those conversations enormously helpful to air my thinking and then move on. Lastly, one of the big lessons I had to learn as I traveled the leadership journey is that it's not always personal. As someone who is very relational, i.e. I get my energy from working in partnership with the team and with partners and talking to people, it is quite personal because one puts a lot of personal self into a relationship. But as a leader, particularly when heading an organization, it's important to remember that actually I am a steward of the organization, which goes well beyond me. So that is what I don't very often speak about my team. So that is why I don't very often speak about my team or my organization. I don't say my team, my organization. I don't put the emphasis on my. At best, it's ours. It's all of ours. But also things go beyond the individual. So sometimes I have to set the Liz Hughes personal aside from the Liz Hughes chief executive to enact that task of being the leader. And I have two visual metaphors that help me with that. The first one I developed as a child protection social worker for working with people having difficult conversations about their children. And understandably, in those situations, it's very sensitive and people can get very angry. To help me stay focused and try and really listen properly to what people were trying to say to me, I envisaged I was a tree with very, very deep roots. I could sway with the storm, but I would stay rooted. I still use that metaphor today, not so much when people are angry with me, because that doesn't happen in that way today, but when I'm facing really challenging situations. The second I developed as a chief executive of my current organization. And it's really simply the idea, when I get up in the morning, I put my chief executive hat on and I put the personal to one side. That leads me on very briefly to digging deep. Gaynor asked me to say something about the way I have led MAP Action through COVID. I would say it's not past tense yet. It is still requiring a leading through as the COVID situation continues. But it is in the right direction. Last year felt like a year of digging very, very deep as a leader. And this is something that has happened throughout my leadership roles when facing tough times. This is when the outlook looks difficult, either because of a difficult interpersonal issue, a performance issue, an organizational change issue, or a finance and funding issue. There are many more. All organizations face one or other of these at different points, and most leaders will face one or other of these at different points, whatever you're doing, including humanitarian work. I have found that it does sometimes require what I call leaning in and being determined to come through the challenge. Now, Map Action has a very marvelous technical director who said to me last year, Liz, I don't see COVID as a challenge. I see it as an opportunity. He was right. Determination, vision, resilience. You see my point. We're circling back to some of my earlier key words. Being a leader is about being able to pivot, to flex, to take on board challenge as opportunity and change. And those are all critical to remaining effective. But sometimes that takes quite a lot out of you. And when it does, taking care of yourself is also really important. My best moments last year was working with the management team to see how we would take things forward. We worked as a team, believing we would work it out, and we did. Not one of us could have done that on our own, and we all knew it. We had hard, honest conversations about things. We trusted one another and we teamworked together. And that's the kind of thing I mean when I say we dig deep. Very lastly, I want to come to kudos. Gaynor kindly mentioned the New Year's Honours OBE that I was awarded last year. It was a totally unexpected thing. It was an immense privilege, and it is deeply, deeply humbling to receive something of that nature. As a chief executive, though, I only shine because of what the team achieve. Our amazing volunteer team, who many of you, I think, either have met or will meet in your work, but also our staff and the management team I've already mentioned, backed by a very excellent chair of our board of trustees who govern our organisation. So in my view, the honour was absolutely for everyone. Giving kudos is really important, and giving it where it is deserved is really important. As a leader, it's important to stay tuned to what people are doing. And I've certainly found at times when I'm busy, it's harder to stay tuned in to the detail of what people are doing and achieving through and for the organisation. That's when I know I need to talk to the team more, listen to what they're doing, and just make a point of walking the shop floor. Equally, it's important as a leader to let the organisation be visible so its services are taken up, so we can have more impact. So it is a tricky balance, because being more visible often involves being somewhere else, representing the organisation to others. So one of my favourite moments of the year is our Volunteer of the Year Award, which is an award I introduced when I joined Map Action in the name of its founding chief executive, who sponsors the award, David Spackman. I wanted to draw attention to the values he instilled in the organisation, each year inviting people to nominate one of our volunteers who has particularly demonstrated those values. So if I miss the contribution somebody's made, other people will be able to look at and be my ears and eyes and bring that to my attention with this award. So that's kudos. In conclusion, being a leader is indeed a privilege. It's also a responsibility, and sometimes it's a burden. For me, it is one where I feel I'm constantly learning and evolving. I am shaped by my gender, by my team, by my experiences, my successes and my failures. Gaynor asked me to say, what do you want to do, or how do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I really can't say. I can't tell you exactly where I will be or what I'll be doing, but I know it will need to continue to challenge and shape me as I meet many amazing people who I will work with and alongside, who I'll have the opportunity to serve as their leader. And hopefully, as I watch them thrive and excel. Leadership's a constant journey, a journey of opportunities, and a journey where we can influence the world in small or big spheres for good. I wouldn't be anywhere else except on this journey. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Gaynor.
Thank you so much, Liz. I have so many things to pick up, and I'm sure the other participants here have very long notes. I can see all of them, writing a lot. But let me just say first, Liz, I'm so grateful that you mentioned a lot of things that really connect with me. Also, as they call me the mother. They call me Mama here, mother. For the ACE program. And one of them really is having that mentor-coach relationship. It's not very often, we actually have it and we implemented it at the ACE program. So I hope that also continues for them. The other thing that really struck me to the core, and maybe because I share your values about being a supportive leader, servant leadership. Now, I'm not going to say more because I know our ACE program participants are just so excited to interact with you and ask you more questions and learn more from you. But before I do that, I'd like to invite all our participants, also those who are joining us from our YouTube live streaming, to share how Liz inspired you today. You will see in your screen, which is being shared now, the link to the Padlet board where you can write your thoughts and to show our gratitude to Liz for inspiring us today. So we will look back at some of those reflections you have, but I will now actually ask participants for their questions. I already have a secret list of people who are so excited to ask you questions. So I'll move into that. I'll call on in this order, Shidi, Kung, Pebbles. Please introduce your name, your country, and ask your question very clearly and concisely because everyone, I know this will be a long line of questions. Shidi, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Shidi from Singapore, and I'm from the Singapore Civil Defence Force. Thank you so much for sharing your leadership experiences. I would like to seek further insight into decision making, because we all know that it is not easy to make a decision in a disaster situation because there are so many stakeholders involved and there are so many factors that can change, that can affect the situation. Perhaps you have some advice on how can we build the courage to be decisive in leadership? Or as what you mentioned earlier regarding vision, how do we trust our intuition? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shidi. That's such a good question. I think that obviously information, I mean, you'd expect me to say this as the head of an information organization, but obviously information is important. The thing that struck me over the years is that you never have in a humanitarian emergency, you never ever have all the information you want in order to make the decision. And I've worked many times, I was an emergency support program representative for Oxfam for several years. And I worked in many different places, often places I didn't really know very well, but leading the humanitarian component of the work. And in those situations, it always felt incomplete and imperfect. But this is where I think working out very quickly who the people are who do understand the context. So that's the first thing is, you know, whether you're working in your own situation or somebody else's situation, working out who understands the context, I think is really important because you do need it to be able to test things on people. And let me give you one example. I was working somewhere once, I won't go into the details of where, but somebody asked me if it was safe to dispatch a relief team. And I literally had arrived in the country 24 hours earlier. And I thought, I have no idea the answer to that question. And it was related to a very bad storm. And it was, would it be safe for the teams to drive down these roads and things, or would they hit floods? And it was a long time ago. And there weren't lots of maps and things around, actually. And so it was very difficult to work it out. And what I ended up having to do was go and talk to 2 or 3 of the staff who'd been, you know, who were from the country, and just really ask them to help me understand what were these roads likely to be like. And then I had to take a judgment call. And what we did was say, okay, we build contingency into this. What happens if this? What happens if that? What happens if the other? And that was the basis. It was a very practical approach to trying to take a decision. So I think there's that. That's the first thing. The second thing you asked me is, how do you build courage? And I think that's, I don't know if I can answer that question. I think it must be a little bit about, are you willing to take a decision? we all know, I'm sure you have seen it yourselves as well, how damaging not taking a decision can be in an emergency situation. There's a time for consultation and participation. There's a time for control and command, actually. And in an earthquake scenario, you really don't have time for a lot of debate and discussion. Again, I want to give you an example. And again, I won't say where it's from, but I worked with somebody who was a shelter advisor to me. And this person was very knowledgeable about shelter, but was absolutely at the wrong stage of the emergency response. He was there very, very early in and was wanting to build a big strategy for shelter when people didn't have any kind of protective covering at all. And it became very apparent to me that this was somebody who probably shouldn't be on the ground because he wasn't going to be able to add value, and actually got in the way of other people trying to make decisions. So it can be like that. So I do think you have to be ready to take a decision early on, but you also have to fit the thing, the type of decision to the situation, the phase of the emergency that you're in. Are you at the very beginning, where things are likely to be more critical? You've got to make sure people's health is secured, they've got water, they're not exposed. Those are the key priorities, aren't they, in the beginning, after the search and rescue phase, or in parallel to it. And then you've got to think about the other things. So I would say it's about fitting your decision-making style and adapting it, but actually, are you willing to take a decision? And I think you'll always feel you don't have enough information, but I think you also have to be careful to wait for the perfect scenario before taking a decision. I don't know that that's answered your question very well, Shidi, but that's the best I can do.
I've seen a lot of nods over over that last one, Liz. So no problem with that. Can I call together Kung and then Pebbles so you can answer the question at once? Kung?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so good afternoon from Cambodia, Liz, and nice to meet you. And yours give me the great opportunity to learn from you. Yes, actually, it is the short term for me to learn from you as you provide any speech in the beginnings of this stage. But on the journeys of early leadership, I think I wonder some challenge myself, my experience. Yes, according to the inspiration. Actually, during my inspiration myself, I also think about inspire others while my keeping inspiration myself. So to reach our team mission or team goals, to keep an approach to continue our leadership journeys. This is my wanderings in my task, in my work. Actually, I work at a subnational administration that closely to the community. So this is my wondering. I think you can give me some this idea or lesson learned from you according to this leadership styles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kung. Pebbles?
Hi, Liz, and hi, everyone. I'm Pebbles from the Philippines, and I work from Office of Civil Defense. I'm really inspired with what you have said, and those words I'm trying to live by those words every day. I'm trying to be better and as a leader. But for my question, I don't know if it's a little bit emotional because it connects with me, because as a leader, sometimes I'm a bit emotional. I get my emotions above me. So can you describe a time wherein you were really scared of being a leader? And then I would like to ask if you have any advice to us, especially that we leaders, we tend to pretend to be fearless. We need to be fearless for the others because we are role models to our members. So that's for my question. Thank you, Liz.
Liz? You're still muted, Liz.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kung, and thank you, Pebbles. Thank you very much. Kung, can I just check I understood your question correctly? Was it how to keep being inspired by the work? Is that what you were asking about?
Sure.
And how to inspire others.
Yeah. So when we inspire ourselves, how to inspire others. Yes.
They're both really great questions, actually. So I think inspiring others, I think that does come from showing success to people. It comes by seeing what you're doing and really showing the excellent efforts that people are making and the achievements and connecting that to what we're ultimately trying to do. So actually, if you're working at a subnational level, that's a great opportunity, isn't it? Because you're close to the impact of decision making, probably closer than anybody. And you've got an opportunity to really think in terms of those stories of the people you're trying to support and the communities you're trying to effect change in. So I think that actually illustrating that to people would be really good. One of the ways we've done that in Map Action recently is we've only had a dedicated monitoring and evaluation person in one role rather than across several roles. We've only had that role since September before last, so not very long at all, just over a year. And what we're already seeing is that has allowed us to capture the evidence of change and of benefit of our work. And that is really inspiring everybody. It's giving a real energy to, yes, this is why we do it. Because people work in this line of work. We are all here because we believe in humanitarian assistance and what it can do for people. And so that's the same for our teams, isn't it? They want to bring about change. If they can see they're doing that and they can be patted on the back and encouraged to keep doing it, then I think that can really help them. I think sometimes inspiration comes from being a bit different in your thinking about something. So I do spend a lot of time scanning the horizon. I look at what are the debates in technology, what are the debates in humanitarian work, what's the latest methods that people are thinking about. I really spend quite a lot of my time looking at all of that and bringing it to my team in different ways for conversation, for strategizing, for program planning. And also, I think, and this is the privilege in a way of working for a small organization that's independent. But I think one of the other things that can be inspiring is we can see an opportunity and we can grab it. We can do it straight away if we want to. And that, I think, really inspires people. And that's not so easy sometimes, is it? Where you have more of a bureaucracy to work through. That can be a little bit more tricky, I think. But those would be my reflections on it. But it is a really good question. How do you inspire people? Yeah, thank you, Kung. And Pebbles, to come to your question, do I feel scared as a leader? Every day. And how do I deal with that? I just say to myself, well, you know, I've been doing this a while now. I think I can do it. The organization hasn't fallen over yet. We're still working, or in whatever situation. And I think about the fact that it's never just about me. It is about the team. And I really put a lot of store in that. I think there are probably times I'm more effective and other times when I'm probably less effective for whatever reason. But ultimately, it is about the team working. In dealing with the emotions of difficult decisions or difficult times when you feel this is really difficult, I use my metaphors. I think of being a tree, and I really think of being very grounded. And I also make sure I don't just keep working to get through a difficult time. It comes back to that looking after yourself. And it'll be different for different people. For me, going for a run really clears my head. For you, it might need to be something else. But I would just encourage you to put your support networks around you, which are obviously going to be outside the team because you can't, as you rightly say, you can't share all your emotional baggage with the team. They don't really need to hear all of that. But make sure you've got people who can support you around you. And then I think it's just, don't be afraid of being scared. It's okay. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, Liz. We still have a few more. I will call on Shwesin, Marvs, and Rini. And then after that, we still have in the list. Shwesin, Marvs, and Rini. Shwesin, over.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. My name is Shwesin from Myanmar. I work for the Department of Disaster Management. I would like to ask in gender role, as you is a female leader, is so great. Is there any ideal female leader who is actually very inspiring for you and help you be successful? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shwesin. I think that it's been a harder journey as a female leader. It has definitely been an issue at points, being a woman in leadership roles. And I think that's partly, I didn't quite expect it at one level. I think that did sort of take me a little bit by surprise. But I suppose how I've dealt with that is, first of all, it's taken me a long time to accept my leadership style, actually. And I think that is a bit about being a woman. And I think the fact is that sometimes women are less confident or feel that they're not good enough at something, or feel that, it's harder to present yourself in some way. I think that can often be a feeling that women have, that they hold back, all of those experiences that have shaped us somehow have sometimes made us less willing to be confident. And some of the things that I do is I think, how would a man think about this? How would a man behave in this situation? And I'm sure I can't get that perfectly right because I'm not a man, but I do think there's a lot to learn from male leadership, actually, in a good way. And I think that sometimes as women, we need to take on board a more direct style, sometimes cutting through things. Sometimes, obviously I'm stereotyping quite a bit here. There will be women who are perfectly capable of doing that, and there will be men who are not. But I think in general, it is fair to say that the way men and women lead tends to be quite gendered. And therefore, it is worth just reflecting on the good bits of both and trying to work on that. So that's how I've tried to adopt it, is to try and think in those sorts of terms. A classic one to give you, I doubt very much this is an issue that you experience, but in the UK, people often will speak over one another. Do you know what I mean by speaking over? When somebody's speaking, somebody else will cut in and take your ground. Now, that is quite a common way that people communicate in the UK when they're having a discussion about something. And what I've noticed is quite often, more often than not, men do that and women stop talking and let the man talk. And so I just adopt little strategies where I just carry on talking. If I'm in a situation where somebody does that to me, actually, whether it's a man or a woman, I'll just carry on talking until they will listen. But obviously that's quite cultural, and I wouldn't suggest you would do that in your situation. I'm just reflecting on the fact that I think understanding the dynamic in your situation and then looking for the good and looking for the bad and trying to work with whatever is good in it, I would encourage you to do. I also think it does create, it is really important to have a diverse team. And actually, if you don't have that, I think you do end up with very much all of the sort of not so good things in one place. And that's the same whether it's an all-woman team, and I have worked in the past in all-women teams, which I think have had their own problems because of that, and if it's an all-male team. So I think diversity, male, female diversity, but also all sorts of other diversities is important to try and help through that. And the teams that have been, when I've worked with multinational teams, the teams that I've enjoyed the most have been the ones that have been the most diverse, actually. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it hasn't always been easy to be a woman. And I mean, just one example, I went to one location where there was a particularly difficult person to work with who was quite significant. I'm sorry I'm being very vague, but I obviously, for obvious reasons, can't give the details. But this person was quite difficult to work with. And I was taking over from somebody who said to me, don't worry, just take him down to the cafe or the pub and have a coffee or something with him in the evening. And I thought, the person I was taking over from was the man. And I thought it's perfectly reasonable for him to do that. But actually, I think the person I was needed to go and talk to was married and had 3 children, worked very long hours. And I thought the last thing in the evening that his wife would appreciate is him going out for a drink with somebody who's a woman, taking even more of his family time to get work done. And I think that sort of informal way of getting work done actually has been the hardest thing that I've come across, because very often decisions have been being taken in the cafe or the bar in the evening or the restaurant in the evening. And that is very excluding of people. And I really work very hard to avoid it and make sure that decisions get taken in proper work meetings in a proper way. But yes, I don't know, Shui Sin, does that answer your question or not really?
Smiling and nodding. I will now call on Marvs and then
Good afternoon and mabuhay here in the Philippines. Thank you, Miss Liz, for the wonderful stories and sharing of experience. It greatly helps us from our own leadership journey. And I like to ask, as a leader, what is your response to someone who questions your decision-making ability?
Oh, that's a very good question, Marvs. Thank you for that. Well, a couple of things. There's the internal little voice in my head that says, really? Really? Do you have to question me? Really? And then there's the external bit of me that just takes a deep breath and says, okay, tell me more. What is it you don't agree with? Because actually it comes back to this point I was making earlier. If you've got people in your team you really trust and you respect, and hopefully you do, then they might have a point and you might need to stop and listen. I think the problem can be in a humanitarian response. If you don't have much time, you don't have the headspace to stop and listen for too long. So you do have to take a decision fairly quickly. Is this something that can wait and I'll come back to it? Or is it something I have to deal with because it's stopping emergency assistance right now? Even if it can wait, I think the important thing is to be reasonable with the person and to say to them, this is a really important point you've raised. And because I want to give it proper attention, I'm going to put it to one side for now and I'm going to come back to it, but we'll talk later, and give them a time in a week, in a month, whenever you think is reasonable. If it's immediate and it's about your immediate work, then clearly you do need to deal with it fairly quickly. I think one of the ways I deal with people disagreeing with me is sometimes I'll change my mind. I'll hear what they have to say and I'll say, okay, let's try your way then. And particularly if they're the subject matter specialist, you know, if the logistician says, this is really not going to work if you do it this way round, then it would be foolish of me to ignore that unless I feel I know something different from him. But, you know, I think you do have to really listen to your experts. If you have doubt about your expert, well, that's a different matter. And I think you have to deal with that in a different way. Sometimes I can see that they're just not understanding my logic. And if they're not understanding my logic, then it's reasonable for them to question it. And that's probably because I haven't communicated very well. So then what I'll try and do is say, well, let's just have a quick chat about this, is what I'm thinking, X, Y, and Z. But what I do with that is if I still see them looking uncertain at the end of it, I'll say, actually, I know you don't agree with this. I'm going to take this decision. And I leave it at that. Oops, sorry. I don't apologize. I don't try and explain any further. I don't try and persuade. I just accept that we're going to have a difference of opinion, but it's my decision ultimately. And then I'll take the decision. It is a tricky one. And I suppose if you get repeated, if you get a lot of people questioning you, or you get the same person questioning you multiple times, those are different problems. And I think they probably require slightly different solutions. But it's okay, isn't it, for people to disagree and say, I would like you to explain this to me. And I think as leaders, it's really important to listen when people do that.
Thank you, Liz, for the wonderful.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Mars, for that good question. Rini?
Yeah, thank you. I really inspire your experience, Liz. Thank you so much. And I want to ask about this is about how we can how can you able to make efficiently delegate responsibility to the team, and what are obstacles and how to overcome them? I'm sorry, I want to know more about your experience. Thank you, Ms. Liz.
Can I just check, Rini? Thank you for the question. Can I just check I understood that correctly? Were you asking me, how do you give responsibility to the team? Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, isn't it? Because it's, you know, we've got to be responsible in our decision making and in the way that we lead. And so it's working out what you can give away and what you need to hold on to, and what you can delegate, what you hold on to. I think it comes to a number of things, actually. First of all, it's about really knowing your people, know their skills, know their comfort zones, know their judgment. Can you rely on them? If they're learning, or if they're new, or if they're inexperienced, I think you can create around them safeguards to support them. So you can enable them to grow into their role by making sure, if you're line managing them directly, you meet with them regularly. I expect the management team in Map Action to meet with their staff regularly, so everybody gets met once a week. And I meet members of my management team once every couple of weeks, generally. I meet the finance director once a week. We stay on top of the figures very closely together. So I think there's a thing about supervision, which is management, isn't it, rather than leadership? But it's supervision. It's making sure you and the person involved understand the priorities, and it's tracking progress. I think it's also about enabling decision-making. And that comes from being very clear what the long goal is, being very clear what results you're looking for, what success you want to see. But it's also about helping your team, because one of the things about giving away responsibility is you need to know that they know when to come back and check with you. And I think that allows you to give more responsibility away in a way. If you know you can trust that when somebody gets into a difficulty, or they're getting into a situation where the program is exposed, or the reputation of the organization is exposed, that they know they need to come back and consult with you, then that enables delegation because you can trust them. And I think that's something quite important to get clear at the beginning, is to talk to people about what your expectations are, where you want people to come back to you, over depending on what your program areas are, where you want them to come back to you. Then I think there's a thing about helping people problem solve and working out their style. How do they prefer to be supported? Do they want you to do things with them, to ask them to go and do it? How does that work? So there's a lot in here. I think in it, being able to delegate is all about understanding your team and trusting them, knowing the limitations, knowing that they know when to come back. But then there's a last piece, which is allowing people to make mistakes. And actually, I really try and promote in the organization a no blame. You know, if something goes wrong, we will just learn from it. Let's not feel that failure is a terrible thing. Actually, it's often the catalyst that you learn for the next thing. Now, that's quite easy if you're not dealing with life and death situations, but I totally understand when you're dealing with urgent humanitarian assistance, that's a bit more risky. So you have to choose where you're going to step in. How vital is it you stay close? How much can you let go a little bit? And I think that really does depend on the situation that you might be in. Does that answer it, Rini, at all? Good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I will give you a little bit of time, Liz, to probably drink water because there's still a lot of questions coming your way. And while you do that, I just would like to read one thing that showed up in what inspired them today, by what you talked about. One says inspirations can come from thinking in different ways and take opportunities to deliver your ideas to others. Another one I'm reading from Shidi again is that leaders are not invincible. Remember to look after ourselves so that we can continue to work effectively in the long run. So you see it now on the screen. And I will now call on Azi, Nova, and Party for the next set of questions. I will read one more while they get into the groove. Leaders become great not because of their power, but their ability to empower others. That's what Pebbles took. All right. So Azi, Nova, and Party.
Thanks, Mama G. Good afternoon, Liz. I'm Azi from Brunei, and I work for the Ambulance Service in the Ministry of Health. Thank you for sharing your leadership experiences with us. So my question for today is, how do you continue to grow and develop as a leader? And what qualities do you think are lacking among today's leaders? So that's all for my question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Azi. That's a really big question, isn't it? How do you continue to learn and grow? I think it's a little bit what I was saying earlier, is allowing yourself some time to do that. And it's really difficult in humanitarian situations to do that. And there's certainly been whole phases of my working career where I have not really grown in a systematic way. I've learned on the job, but I haven't always grown in a systematic way. I do think there's a place to take stock. I think actually to take stock and decide to go off and study something else, or put yourself on a course of some sort, is a really good way. And certainly a few years ago, I did a piece of sorry, I can't think of the word. After my degrees, after I'd done my master's, I did later piece of work, postgraduate studies, that's the word. And it was a study that took me about 6 months, and I did it around work, and work allowed me to have a day off every month or something like that to do my studies. And then I did it in the evening and the weekends. And it just allowed me time to reflect on an issue that had been of interest to me in humanitarian response, but it also allowed me time to learn new things. And I found it really stimulating. It sort of activated a different part of my brain. In a way, you're all doing this already because you're on this course, so you're sort of doing that. But I think it's exactly this sort of thing. It's coming on a course, it's joining things, doing things online, yes, but I actually think it's about the engagement with other people that has, for me, most value. So that's the sort of way I'd say to stay fresh. I think attending things, as I said earlier, I scan the horizon a lot. I do attend quite a lot of conferences online now, actually, because we can. I probably wouldn't have gone to so many in person. So I think it's just keeping a very, again, in humanitarian work, it sort of covers everything in one sense. So it's keeping a very broad knowledge base in a way, but actually pick and choose what you do and where you spend that time. So there's certain sources, which I think that's going to be really interesting reading. I'll read that, or certain sort of thought leaders that I follow, and I hear what they have to say. So that's one way. What do I think is lacking? I think it might depend what type of leaders you're talking about. I'm not sure I would really want to reflect on humanitarian leaders, because I think the situation we work in today is much, much harder than it was probably when I set out in working in humanitarian work in Kosovo all those years ago. And it's harder for all sorts of reasons. I think the context is changing. The effects of climate change are worsening. There's more insecurity and conflict and dispute. Access is difficult. There's many different issues, I think, that humanitarian leaders are facing today. If I were to come back to one thing, no, I'm going to have two things that I think are really important. It comes back for me to courage, because humanitarian leadership is very different, I think, from other types of leadership, in that you are dealing with the most desperate situations, the most critical time spans, and people's lives. And what you choose to do will make a difference very significantly to people's lives. So that does take courage. And actually, I think Shidi asked me earlier, how do you get courage? But in a way, the fact that you're working in it is a sign of that, isn't it? You're willing to take on these difficult tasks. So you're already there. But I think holding on to your courage is important, without that being arrogant. I'm not suggesting you sort of throw your weight around, but just being courageous, being willing to take decisions without perfect information. I think sometimes I see that lacking. And the other thing is integrity to your values, and staying very, very close to your values. That's difficult when there is so much around us at the minute, and particularly in a political environment, so much around us which questions that. So I think those would be the two that I would highlight. Yeah, you might disagree.
Thank you. Nova? Yes, Nova.
Thank you, Mama G. Good morning, Liz. Good afternoon to our colleagues. I'm Nova Ibanez from the Philippines, working at the Office of Civil Defense. So, like Pebbles, I would like to relate my question on my personal experience. Because me, as a leader, I often question myself, am I enough? Did I perform my task well as a leader? Or are my subordinates happy with my performance as their leader? So my question, Liz, is, do you measure your own performance as a leader? And how do you measure it? Thank you.
Thank you, Nova. I think those are questions, aren't they, that all of us ask ourselves, I'm sure, often. And I definitely ask myself that often. Have I made the right decision there? What do the team think about that? Are people content? I think one of the challenges is, as a leader, is our job isn't to make people happy. Obviously, it's nice if they are happy. I think they probably perform better if they're happy, but that's not ultimately our role. And I sometimes have to catch myself and remember that. But actually, am I effective? I try and measure that in a couple of ways. I think partly that supervision relationship is a two-way relationship in a way. It's not just what are they doing, but how are they feeling about the support they're getting or the decisions I'm making? Are there issues there that members of the team want to talk about? Sometimes I openly invite it. If I've taken a decision which was difficult, I might put out an email to the membership and invite people to comment on it. Sometimes it's very formal. You know, we've had to sometimes move into stages of having to change the roles because of funding and things like that, that's a formal consultation of a decision that I'm setting out very clearly as a possible decision for them to feed into, and inviting people to comment on that. And I think there are multiple ways you can do that, but it is about checking in with people in different ways. What I would caution, though, is doing that in a way that's apologetic or kind of nervous. I think it's reasonable to ask people's opinion on your decisions, but to do that with confidence, because if you don't, I think people do sort of start to think, well, maybe she's not really sure what she wants to do. And that's not necessarily helpful, particularly if it's a contested decision in some way. So I think being clear, how far are you opening up the decision for debate? How far are you just informing, but wanting to hear people's view of it? I think that's a good thing to do. How far is it a consultation? And I think being clear about all of those things, but I think it sort of comes into a natural rhythm, if you like, of feedback. And of course, we have an annual review process every year, which is a very deliberate period of 360 review, and people feeding back formally what they're happy with, what they're not happy with. And we do that around a set of questions: what motivates people, what did they achieve, what could they do better, what would they like from me or from their line management, and all that sort of thing.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes.
All right, Party.
Hi, Liz, and thank you for sharing your experience about it. I'm very grateful to hear and have a chance to meet you here. So my question is, how do you do, or what is the best way to cope with something is not going as a plan that your team says, and how you lead your team to achieve that goal? Thank you.
Yes, that's a really good question, actually. How do you lead your team, or how do you deal with something that's not going to plan? I think the first thing is to know it's not going to plan. So you need to make sure you've got in place mechanisms that pick up progress. How do you know, what's been delivered, what's been done, what was intended, what was funded? We, in our organization, I think we've had to deal with putting in place some mechanisms like that, because we've grown as an organization and our program has got more complicated, and it's meant that it's been harder to track, is something on plan, and is it going to deliver what it needs to within the stated time frame for the donor. So I would say that's part of it, is you've got to know where you're at, and we've introduced regular review times of the budget, which actually tells you a lot. If the money isn't being spent, or is being spent but things are not going to plan, that tells you quite a lot that something's not quite going in the right direction. So we spend quite a lot of time looking at the budget at senior level against the plans that have been made. And we do that, the finance director does that with all budget holders monthly, and then I do it quarterly with budget holders and the finance director. If we see a problem emerging, we're not spending enough of the budget and the work is being held up for some reason or other, then I dig down. If it's my line report, I dig down with that person as to what's going on, what's happening, and we try and figure out the plan to resolve it. And then what we'll put in place is regular checkups on that plan. Now, sometimes in the past, in other situations, some of that's been related to personnel not having capacity. This is outside Map Action, it's before I joined Map Action and other jobs. Personnel not having the capacity to deliver the plan. And then I think you need to look at, well, do you need to bring in more resources? Do you need to go upwards to your line to get more help? Do you need to renegotiate people's expectations of what's possible? Is the original request unreasonable and it's not possible for a team to deliver it. So I think you have to look at all of those things and see whether it's about supporting a new plan, getting more resources, managing people's expectations, dealing with performance, and then working out what is it in this given situation we need to look at. That's sort of in summary. I think what I would say about all of that is management, really. And I would draw a distinction between that and leadership. The difference is if as a leader, you find yourself getting involved in management tasks of that nature, sometimes that's legitimate to do that, because what you're doing is, if it's a serious enough task, what you're doing by doing that is saying, I'm staying very, very close to this because it matters that we get it sorted out, and you're going to have my best support to help you sort this out. So that's kind of how I approach that. Does that help?
All right. We have one more round. Perhaps this is the last with the time that we have. I would like to call on Siti, Carl, and Vong. And while that's being set up, I would like to, okay, I cannot find my Padlet anymore. Okay, Siti, go ahead.
Okay, hi Liz. Greeting from Brunei Darussalam. Okay, thank you for sharing your inspiring professional journey with us today. So I have two questions here. Okay, my question number one, sometimes life can test our strength and our endurance, right? How do you build your resilience to adversity, which is to bounce back from life challenges and become stronger than ever before? That's my first question. And then my second question is, what is the difference between doing things right and doing the right things? I think that's all from me. Liz, thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall I answer that one first? Those two first, yes?
Let's hear the other two. Perhaps the questions are related. Carl, then Vong.
Hi, Liz. Good afternoon. I am Carl Luces from the Philippines also. I work under the Office of Civil Defense. So my question is related to the nature of your work, collaborating with various stakeholders and clients in relation to mapping. So in your previous engagements, was there a time where a collaboration reached a point where further discussions can no longer be fruitful, or it causes more misunderstanding? So how are you able to manage and deal with the situation, especially if the objective of the activities is an urgent matter for a specific humanitarian response? Thank you.
And last, Vong.
Good afternoon, Lin. Sabadi. My name is Pung Dian from Laos. Thank you very much for your sharing, for your experience on the leadership. I have one question. I know that for your leader journey is very long, and you have met many experience and many things, both bad and good. So could you share the experience when you find a tough problem? So what is the motivate you to fight back that problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All very good questions. Vong, can I just check I understood your one? You said, could I say what motivates me to fire back? Did I get that right?
Yes. What motivates you to fight the tough problem when you found it?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So, Siti, thank you for your two questions. So, endurance, how do you come back? That's a little bit like Vong's question, I think, unless I misunderstood it. But I think I'm somebody who works in a very focused way. I can have my hand over lots and lots of things, but when I'm really head down, I'm absolutely tuned into what I'm doing, and I'm just 150% on it. And I can do that for quite a long time, but I definitely hit a wall when I need to stop doing that and I need to do something else and take a breather. And actually, that's what I usually do, is I just stop and take a break. What keeps me going and gives me the grit and determination sometimes to keep going is because I really value what we do and I believe in it. And I think that's what I come back to again and again, really. The difference to doing things right and doing the right thing is, in a way, doing things right is a subset of doing the right thing, isn't it? It's no good doing things right if you're doing the wrong thing, actually. So you've got to get that second point right first. You've got to work out what are the priorities. Where should I put the effort first? And then you can figure out how you're going to do it. And I think that's a really interesting question. Actually, I don't think my team would mind me saying that one of the things we often have conversations about when we do our annual simulation exercise in Map Action is we have conversations about, so we throw people a simulation and they've got to map and work out what's needed. And we often end up having conversations about, did you plan out the strategy for what you were going to produce, or did you just start with the first map? And quite often, because they're under pressure, they might have started with the first map. Actually, what usually ends up happening is their experience has come through and they usually know what that first map. So they've sort of got a strategy in their heads, but they haven't mapped it out necessarily visually anywhere. And I'm always wanting to see that map out visually, first of all, but it's usually in their heads and that's how they're doing it. So they are, the point of that is it's about, that's how do you take that first set of decisions that shape what you then do? And that's the doing the right thing set of decisions. And then how you do it, you know, that comes second. Carl, I'm going to come, if I may, to your question last, because I think it's the harder question, actually, and I'm going to give myself a bit more time to think about it. And in the meantime, come to Vong's question, if you don't mind, which I think is what really fires me up, what inspires me. Is that correct? Yes, okay. Actually seeing the difference we make, feeling like we're improving things for people who have faced desperate circumstances, and recognizing that we're all connected. And I suppose I feel that quite strongly, that it could be me, or it could be my dad, or it could be my cousin or my brother or my sister who's facing those difficulties, if we were in different circumstances. And I suppose it's that feeling connected to people and valuing the change we're trying to bring about, and then seeing programs that achieve that. And when I see programs that achieve that, I think, yes, actually, this is why I do it. This is worthwhile, and we can make a difference. I think also doing things like this, I find very, very inspiring, you know, to meet all of you in your separate areas of work, spending time on developing your knowledge and understanding of leadership. I find that very inspiring. I think that's very committed, and I respect that a lot. So, you know, for me, it comes back in a way to the people and how people are changing and being changed by their circumstances. I hope that answers it, Vong, but very happy to hear back from you if it didn't. And then Carl, what do you do when you reach a point in a partnership where you can't progress? How do you decide what to do about that? I'm really trying to rack my brains for an occasion where we got to a point where we said, no, we can't go on. It certainly never has happened contractually or under an MOU before. I think it tends to happen at an earlier stage, if I'm honest. It happens before we get into joint work together. So it's tended to happen at the stage of, can we do this thing together or not? And that assumes there's a choice in there, that you will work with a partner or you might not work with a partner. So I'll just take that example, and then I'm going to go on to something else that I think is a bit more tricky. So in that situation, what we do in Map Action is try and look where the energy is. Can we connect with this organization? Do we have common values and goals? And have we got a piece of work we can do together? And if we find it too hard to generate propositions with the other organization, either because neither of us are prioritizing it or because we can't work it out, then what we tend to do is say, actually, this isn't really progressing. And we don't make it a formal withdrawal. We just let it drop, actually. And we don't try and progress. We don't try and force something that's not there. In a situation where you're working with multiple stakeholders in a national response, you probably don't have that choice because you will naturally have to work with who you will have to work with. And my most parallel experience is as a statutory social worker working with multiple disciplines in the interests of the child, is basically, in a way, the work has to take precedence. So I may not like people I work with in that situation. I may not really respect the way they're doing things, but I will do everything to make it work because actually they are a stakeholder equal to me, and we both have a common task, which is the child we're trying to support. And in that situation, I think you have to do the best you can do. If it becomes unmanageable, then that's where I think you need sort of support at a more senior level. And I would take things up higher. And I have done that as a social worker where I've had people not doing what they should be doing. I've taken that up at a higher level to have it dealt with. But it is the hardest thing, absolutely, to have to deal with.
All right. So that has been really very enlightening in many, many, many ways. You can take this conversation and end, by 2022. So thank you so much, Liz. And the questions from the ACE program participants were kind of tough, right?
Yeah, really tough. Yeah. And really, really interesting, Gaynor. I really have enjoyed meeting everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure. I loved all the questions. It's really thought-provoking. Thank you.
So I'm just conscious of the time, Liz. We're spilling over already as we go by the minute. So I will not attempt to summarize even. I just would like to take this moment to capture all of us together in this room and, forever mark in Center history. It's also our 10th anniversary this month. So can we all turn on our videos? And then I have an additional instruction. So please prepare, not yet, because it fades away after some time. So choose your favorite, choose your emoji that reflects your feeling today after engaging with Liz this afternoon. And do that when I say go. So all of us will choose the icon. So that will give our IT guys the time to capture all of us with your emojis. All right, now everyone, have you chosen your emojis? So click your emojis now and then smile. Smile on camera. And our staff, please let us know. I think all of us can fit in one screen. Do we want to try that again? Because the emojis just go away so quickly.
Maybe 3, 2, 1.
Okay, one more. Ready? Choose your emoji. Go. All right, I think hopefully that's captured. Definitely, Liz, we will send it to you. For the others who were not able to speak, we are so sorry. But please add your questions and whatever you want to say to Liz in our Padlet so we can also share that with Liz. Liz, any final, after hearing all those questions, anything you want to say to our ACE program as well as to AHA Center, who are with us today, and some of our partners as well who have joined us this afternoon?
To the AHA Centre, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for the partnership, and thank you so much for the invitation and for putting on this course. I think it's really, really excellent. And to all of you as participants, well done for being on the course, and huge congratulations for getting through it. And I really wish you well. Your task is a tough task, and I send my best wishes to you in it, and I'm sure you will do brilliantly. Thank you, Gaynor.
And we have ACE participants who would also wish to say our thanks to you. Can I first call on someone who has not yet spoken? A from Thailand.
Okay, thank you, Mama G. You hear me? Yes, right? Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pumalin Tawarodom from Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation from Thailand. And today, on behalf of AHA Center Executive Program Batch 7 participants, I would like to express our deep gratitude to you for taking your time to attend the leader talk, like a seminar for this afternoon. We will learn and get the various of your experience that you have shared, as well as an exchanging opinion with each other from you and our participant. And from the talk seminar, we have learned a lot, and we will be the great benefit to the future development of disaster management and humanitarian work at both in the national and regional level, which make us to be the ready face in many challenges and will be the good leaders in the future. Finally, we would like to express our gratitude once again, and I would like to ask all participants to clap your hands in her honor, Miss Liz Hughes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more, Liz. Siti.
Okay. Hi, Liz. Okay. I just prepared this for a short time of time. Okay. On behalf of all S7 batch program participants and everybody here at this latest talk session, I thank you for being with us today and for sharing your inspiring professional journey that relates to the theme of the event, developing the future leaders of ASEAN in disaster management, as well as it also relates to the ultimate goal of S program to prepare the disaster management professionals to be the future leaders with expertise in humanitarian assistance operations and in strengthening the operationalization of One ASEAN, One Response. I particularly like to hear so much on 6 key concepts, strategies, and rewarding experiences that you have shared with us today. And learn your compass knot and trust it. It's fantastic. I'm sure everyone also agree that it is a good decision to attend this event. So once again, thank you. And I would like to invite everybody here to join me in thanking our guest speaker this afternoon with a big applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Liz Hughes, Met Action. And on behalf of S7 batch program participants, we would like to take this opportunity to thanks to AHA Center, the government of Japan and partners to support JAIF, the government of New Zealand and the United States, the United Nations agencies, the Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement, GNS Science, ADMIR Partnership Group, Red R Australia, U.S. Forest Service, and academic institutions such as Middlebury Institute for International Studies and Monetary and MIIS, ASEAN Institute of Management AIM, and Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies APCSS. Many thanks from all of us. Collaboration to overcome challenges together. Now is the time to put words into action because only together we can save lives and make true progress towards a safer and more resilient planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's really a very good close to this wonderful afternoon. Take care, Liz. See you around in the future. Hopefully, we will be able to restore and see you over at the AHA Center, and as well as your colleagues and volunteers. For those of you who haven't seen the video of the AHA Center anniversary, that will be the last thing we have for today. Other than that, your afternoon is free. Again, take care, Liz, and all the best.
When we set up an organization from the scratch, everything was a challenge at the time because the concept is very much like now what people talk, the startup. So we were at that time is very much a startup. I mean, if the story of a startup, you start with 1%, 2% in the garage, like story of Facebook, Google, and all of those. The story of the AHA Center is very much like that. A few people, started the AHA Center in a very much empty office with limited facilities, but we had a lot of dreams, a lot of motivation to achieve something big.
So before the establishment stage, which was during Pak Said Faisal's era, there was another stage prior to that, and I call it planting the seed stage. It was the time when the idea of the AHA Center was planted into the first draft of the text of the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response. So there was no reference in ASEAN. So we started with a blank sheet, basically having the dream, having the vision. But that dream was also driven by fear of having another tsunami, that the ASEAN countries would not be able to help one another. So everybody was really pulled by that vision that if there is another tsunami as big as Indian Ocean tsunami, we should be able to help one another. And I think looking back, we fulfilled that dream.
How could AHA Center survive for the 10 years? I think it's a very much a collaborative effort of many people. Of course, starting at the very early stage, I could see the tremendous support from the governing board, the ASEAN Committee of Disaster Management. I would say it would be very difficult to imagine the AHA Center at this stage without the support of the ASEAN Secretariat at that time. In particular, it was DMHA led by Ibu Nakama, who's later become the executive director of the AHA Center, and all the dialogue partners as well. So I think it's very much a collaborative model of different actors moving together. And of course, I would say, I think until now, a passionate staff or team member or super team, we call it the AHA Center, I think very, very important.
Over the last 10 years, I think something important that determines the success of AHA Center, I think we talk about commitment, passion, and also being compassionate. And also the staff of AHA Center, I think we can see the passion, the compassion, and also the commitment in terms of disaster planning and also responding to disaster. I think we are committed to help our fellow ASEAN citizens in times of needs.
There's so many achievements actually that we should be proud of as a team, as an organization. Somehow, the significant achievements were actually the most difficult moments. And these were during the period of 2018 when the AHA Center had to respond to multiple disasters back to back. And these were like catastrophic disasters, like 6 or 7, almost at the same time, including the Central Sulawesi triple disasters. AHA Center was really pushed to the limit. It was the first time, I think, in the history of AHA Center that we exercised almost all aspects of One ASEAN, One Response. There were other achievements. For example, I think we have been able to double the number of ERAT, the ASEAN Emergency Response Assessment Team. I think now we've got over 322 ERAT members from all the 10 ASEAN countries. We're able to triple the number of the future leaders of ASEAN, the ACE, the ASEAN Executive Program, graduates to almost 100. We're able to increase the number of regional stockpiles from 1 in Malaysia now to 3, including Philippines and Thailand. And we facilitate a lot of knowledge exchange. We become not only the center that facilitate One ASEAN, One Response, but also the center for learning and exchange.
I would say partnership is one of the key cornerstone and main thing that AHA Center have been able to develop over the last 10 years. I would say nobody can do everything on your own. We need to learn from people. We need to have partners to work with us. So I think partnership is something important and something that we treasure. We treasure the relationship and the network and the collaboration we have developed. So this is something that will definitely continue and is important for AHA Center and ASEAN member states.
The AHA Center was built and founded by the member state, so it has to stay relevant for the member state. But I think we need to push it more, not only the member state and the governments, but also the people of ASEAN. I also hope that the AHA Center can be the trendsetter. When the founders of AHA Center first planted the idea of AHA Center into the draft of the agreement, there was no benchmark, there was no reference, right? Now we should be the reference for other regions.
I would say we have progressed and developed well. And I think over the last few years, I think one of the dream of AHA Center, I think as mentioned by previous EDs also, I think is that to make AHA Center into a world-class coordinating center for disaster management and response. We have also aspired to share our best practices with the world, and then to showcase some of the products, the programs and initiatives that ASEAN has and also developed over the last 10 years. I think we have seen a response to many disasters, and out there in the ASEAN regions, we have many ASEAN people from ASEAN who are very experienced and has got the expertise and knowledge to actually bring the disaster response landscape in ASEAN to the
to next level.
The dream of making the AHA Center always as the organization of choice, first to call for the member states. The dream of making ASEAN great. Making ASEAN great, meaning that, for example, during that time, we always, whenever we had a disaster, then the news will put a headline, where is ASEAN and what is ASEAN doing? I think making ASEAN great in terms of the AHA Center is being able to answer that question with confidence and pride.
Happy 10th anniversary, AHA Center. That ends today, today's session. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, evening, or day, everyone. Bye.